Invasion of Poland. Therefore, I was born in 34, and I was 6 at the time. And for 6 months, we fought the Greeks, and I'm we in that respect. We fought the Italians very successfully. It was amazing because they were so much more numerous and well-equipped, and they weren't as good fighters, however. But the Greeks, you probably have heard in various wars that they were very ferocious. They do have, yes, we have a wonderful reputation in that respect. And so my family consisted of my parents, and they were, my father was 13 years older than my mother, which was fairly customary in those days because they wanted 2 things. The men were supposed to sow their wild oats first and then settle with a wife. And also they had to be able to make a living. So not everybody went to the university. We were very different from the United States in my student days. Over there we had a lot of culture, but not a lot of material possessions and wealth and savvy. Like ordinary Greeks in my parents' generation didn't know how to drive because private cars were not customary. The people had like vans for moving merchandise or selling things from a vehicle, but not because they were private conveniences. So anyway, that was the situation in Greece at the time, and we were very proud that we were defeating the Italians. And it lasted 6 months until Hitler came to the aid of Mussolini, who was the head of Italy, the dictator there. And within days, Greece fell, the mainland anyway, fell to the hands of the German army. At that point, when the war began with Germany invading from Bulgaria, which is north of Greece, my father sent a taxi. We were in a village to avoid bombings in our hometown. My father had been the president of the Jewish community in Larissa, the 3rd biggest city in Greece. Now there's another 3rd biggest city, like competing with Larissa. But some people that know Russian would know Larissa. That's a female name in Russia. But that was the name of our hometown. And my father was a businessman, an importer and exporter of wholesale agricultural grains like wheat, barley, rice, and so on. And during the downfall of the economy and everybody, and the time that our resources were just about gone, my father sold honey out of a big pan with a ladle under the lid. He sold honey door to door. So he was a man that was a worker, and he was not too proud to do anything necessary that was honest and would make us a living. So I'm very proud of my dad for that. What happened when the Germans invaded and we fled to Crete, hoping to end up in Egypt, first he chartered a driver and van and truck to take us as far down the mainland as possible, and then he chartered a little crew and a fishing boat called the kaiki, for those of you that know Greek, and took us down to Crete. And in Crete we met a fabulous family. They have all been honored by Yad Vashem as righteous among the nations. The couple, their 5 children, and their son-in-law, who wasn't with us at the time, but he gave shelter to my mother's younger sister when her husband was caught with the rest of his family. She was out shopping for Pesach, for Passover. And that's why he was also named a righteous among the nations in that family. So 8 of my family's rescuers were named. There could have been more, but there are people in my past who were so traumatized by their participation in this. It was very dangerous what they did. The first family that took me in eventually also invited my parents and my little brother, who was 4 years younger than I was. So he started out when he was 2 years old. And so they became fugitives just like us for having hidden Jews, because people recognized my father, who was a very well-known person in a small country, as the president of the Jewish community in Larissa. This was not, it's not by the synagogue or like the church. It's not like the presidency of the church. It's community-wide, including the villages surrounding the bigger city. So that was like an elected privileged position as a spokesperson and an ambassador, basically, a mediator between the Christian communities and the Jewish population in there. Do you have any questions? Maybe I'm...
Tell us your story. What happened?
Okay.
What happened to you?
So, well, first we went to Crete, and we ended up going to the mountains with a Cretan family that my father met. He asked to meet the most prominent businessman in the town, and it wasn't exactly a village, it was just a small town. And we met this amazing family. And so when the invasion started, it was not even 25 miles away from us, in the next bay. And there are maps in my book, has maps, and I did bring, I will leave you one of the books. I brought 3 with me in case anybody was interested. Where was I?
You met with this other family?
Yeah, we met when my father went and he found this family packing to leave for the mountains. And he said to the men in the family, "What will become of us, my friend?" The men were speechless. He didn't know what to say. And my father said, "I now have but you and God." So the men looked at his wife. She nodded. It's very emotional for me to this day. And he said, "Come." We will all go together. It won't be easy. He sent his younger sons to borrow more animals so that my father and I could share a dark mule, and he himself rode the man in the family. His name was Xirouchakis, that the Greeks pronounced the X, Xirouchakis, like a KS. And they don't say Zirouchakis, like Americans might. But this is how we were taken to the mountains. Now the baby, the 2-year-old, had an amoebic dysentery attack, and he was crying. It was very difficult. We were really dangerous. If anybody had gotten wind of having Jewish fugitives among this crowd, because we didn't know the ropes to pretend. Even later on, my mother learned the ropes, because one of the daughters of this rescuing family in Crete was very religious, and she went to a nearby chapel to her house twice a day. My mother began to go with her and they would cross themselves. They would make the sign of the cross in the Greek fashion, approaching the church and then coming out of the church. But when they came out of the church, across from it were the Gestapo headquarters. So they had nerves of steel, these women.
Wow. Was
Yes.
there any worry about an accent difference being on Crete?
No.
Was there a different accent?
Not really. We didn't have an accent because my parents had decided that we would not even be taught Ladino in the home, that we would have a regular accent, go to regular schools, have tutors that gave us French or something, but took us for a walk and spoke French. But we were.
So they couldn't tell if you were from Crete?
No. There is a little accent in Crete, but no. But generally speaking, you can blend in. But thank you for saying that, because it could, in certain parts of Crete, there is a dialect. That it's not that they have a lot of words different, but they pronounce them.
Yeah. Like in America.
Yes.
You can tell where someone's
Yes,
from.
like somebody being from the south.
South.
So did you have to give up, basically had to put your Jewish faith on hold then, pretty much, right? Where you were living?
Yeah, well, we were pretty secular, although my grandparents on my father's side, they had 2 kitchens and 4 sets of dishes, so they had the dishes for meat and the dishes for dairy, and also the ones for Passover, same way. So they were much more observant, but they raised, I think my grandmother had 12 live births, but only 6 of her kids survived to adulthood. And unfortunately, both she and a couple of her daughters and their families, including grandchildren that I never met because they lived in a different part of Greece, they perished. They were arrested and deported to Auschwitz, and they didn't survive.
So you were hidden in plain sight.
Absolutely, exactly the expression we use. Yes, I took the name of Julia. I thought it was a little less exotic than Yolanda. So Iulius is July. Yulia is the feminine name of somebody who's named after that month. So I was Yulia, or Julia. And my oldest granddaughter, who's graduating soon from law school, is named Julia, for the name that saved me.
So how long were you hidden in plain sight?
Well, first of all, we had these adventures in Crete. We ended up having to leave because my father was suspected of being Jewish, and we were warned by a man that had come from Central Europe, learned Greek, and offered himself as an interpreter for the Nazis, the occupation forces, to save himself. Now, he also disappeared at the end, so nobody knows whether he was discovered and killed. But for a while, he was out there, and he was very obligated to the people we were obligated to that took us to the mountain. So this guy, he warned his rescuer, his own benefactor that had given him odd jobs and who had taken us to the mountains to, he really, he was very grateful, wanted to save our own rescuer from any destruction we would rain on him and his family by being Jews. And so he warned him that my father was suspected of being Jewish. And we were like, decided, yeah.
Wow.
Okay.
Invasion Crete.
Okay. And how old were you when
And then when I went into hiding without my family,
Okay.
although they joined us eventually,
Sure.
I was 8. And when we were liberated, I was 10.
Wow. That's a number of years, yeah.
How did that come about? What was that day, or what was that event, that liberation event?
Well, it was like the most fabulous party you can imagine. Women had brought the Persian carpets out of the homes and lined the streets for the liberator trucks to run over. And they were so demure. They were supposed to be very modest and virginal. And they kissed the liberators. The liberators threw candy and cigarettes around. I mean, it was, I remember it like a big circus, you know?
Yeah.
It was really fantastic, fantastic. I was with my mother. It was in October, the 14th, I think, of October, 44.
October.
We've heard a lot about, and we know something about a lot of the cooperation between the other governments, the Hungarians and the Poles and the Austrians and all of that, and some of the early activity that was oppressive to the Jews, even before the Nazis. Was any of that going on in Greece?
You know, there probably were occasional incidents of discrimination. There were like rumors that the Jews might take a Christian child and drink his blood or something. I don't know. It was like crazy stuff. I don't remember exactly these ideas, but because my father was the president of the community in Larissa, we were very ambassadorial in the entire family. We just did not indulge in those kinds of rumors, and my parents used Ladino, which is the Jewish dialect of the diaspora from Spain and Portugal. They used Ladino to tell secrets among the grown-ups. But I learned to understand. I learned to understand Ladino because I was very eager to know their secrets. I mean, rumors, scandals. So, yes.
So after being sort of in hiding for so long, were you ever afraid after coming out of that hiding to, show your Judaism? Like, were you ever afraid of
No.
saying that?
No. I went to an American school, a school organized by Americans, offering the full curriculum of the department. There was like government departments, like the Department of Energy and things like that, or the Department of Religion and Education, always together. But at the time of the war, the head of the Greek church was a statesman, a visionary statesman. He said, but no conversion shall be attempted as long as the Jews are under a death sentence. Now, in the constitution of Greece at the time, you could convert into the Greek religion, Greek Orthodox, but you couldn't convert away from it.
Interesting.
So he warned that if they are trying to save the Jews, which he had ordered that everybody try, that no conversion should be attempted as long as the Jews are under a death sentence. And I mean, I think this was unique in Europe.
Absolutely.
Now, there's another thing that was unique in Europe. Yes, I'll take your question. Okay.
Has the Jewish community revived itself in Greece? Has it ever gone
It's
back?
very bad now. There's very few Jews left. There's a lot of intermarriage. And I haven't been there for 13 years, so I don't really know the latest. And the press about Greece and the poverty and everything is so dreadful. I just don't know. I don't know. I don't think things are not as good as, but the per capita decimation of the Jews in Greece was second only to Poland.
Wow.
Sometimes when I have kids in the audience, I ask 9 of them to stand up. And then I say, all but you, Joe, the one with a purple shirt or something, remain standing. The others sit down. Those are the ones that died. And only 1 out of 9 survived.
When you were in hiding, were you aware of everything that was going on?
No.
No?
No, I wasn't with my parents most of the time for 2 years. I was hiding first in the home of the people that became fugitives for having hidden Jews, because they also took in my parents when they became homeless for another reason, because they were extorted at gunpoint, and they could stay where they had been staying in hiding. And they came to hide with my own rescuers. I think somebody had a question. Yes.
Kind of taking more off what Wayne said, knowing that there were so many that didn't make it from Greece, and the fact that you were liberated in October 44, but the war was still raging in
Yes.
Europe for quite a while. In fact,
Well,
major offensive
another,
occurred.
another 6 months,
But
yes.
I guess my question is, you were liberated, but was there any concern, even after you partied, but you were in hiding for 4 years, was there any concern like, well, this might come back again, this might not
No.
be fully over?
No. There were problems because we had the Civil War following liberation, where there was a very unfortunate incident where the government or the British or somebody, one of the liberator armies, shot at civilians in the square because somehow they thought that this might be a communist thing. And I can't begin to tell you how tragic that was for years. And then we had the colonels that took over, which was a dictatorship. And when we got rid of the colonels, there was amnesty, and people stopped saying, you fought in this part of the resistance rather than that part of the resistance. In other words, the non-communist or the communist. It wasn't communist. People were patriots. In fact, I can tell you a story about the resistance. Didn't happen to me though, so I can't really vouch for it. But I did research it and I interviewed people, and I was told this story. Do you want me to tell you? Yes.
I was curious when we were researching the story for Frank. The situation in Amsterdam became very grave, even beyond what the Frank family was experiencing. How was that, as the Germans kind of started chokeholding the country, how was the situation?
It was terrible. It was like that. It was horrible because the closer they came to losing the war, the more maniacal they became in grabbing a hold of any resistance fighter, any Jew, any
Just killing them.
retarded person. I mean, they were crazy about who should be destroyed because, God forbid, we might have that contaminated blood or something. I don't know what the heck they wanted.
And did food become a problem?
Food became a problem. It was the occupation. There was a lot of poverty and starvation. And my father had connections with mills, so he was able to purchase flour, bring it to a pasta making factory, and have them make him pasta so he can sell it wholesale and make a living during the the occupation while we were in hiding. And that's where he met another man who was a baker. He had a neighborhood bakery, and he was my so-called godfather, the person that took me in, because my father said, I have a little girl and I'm afraid we kept getting recognized, and she might, if we get caught, she will not survive. And the man said, I will take her. I will take her and raise her with my own little girl. And his daughter was 2 or 3 years younger than I was. And I said to him, you couldn't make ends meet. You had to have another job because the bakery was not enough. It was a bread shop, but the bread shop was with coupons and at a fixed price. It wasn't an enterprise. It was like, selling at fixed, with a pittance of a profit. That's why he was in the pasta factory. Well, that's where he met my father. And then he said, I will take her and I will pretend she's my baptismal daughter. The goddaughter in Greek is the baptismal daughter.
Okay.
Are you Greek?
No, I was raised Catholic though.
Oh,
so I'm
okay.
familiar with
Right.
Yes.
Exactly.
It's
God,
kind of the same, yeah.
Yeah. We have godparents. in the
Yes,
Catholic
but
faith.
it's not, they weren't godparents, they were baptismal parents, because, and that is even more indicative of Christian upbringing. So, you know, it sort of bestowed an aura of legitimacy of them as fugitives, you know.
What was the other thing that you were going to tell us that was unique about
In Greece.
in Greece?
What happened that made Greece unique from other countries?
Yeah, you said the first one was the person declaring that
No conversion.
No conversion,
until
yes.
the Jewish
Yes,
people
oh,
were
I have to
freed.
tell you, there is an island, and it's all in my book, and it's due west from Athens. I mean, way in the other sea,
Okay.
on the west side of Greece, and toward Italy, and instead of toward Turkey on the east. And the island is called Zakynthos. Sometimes foreign people call it Zanti because it's easier to pronounce. Anyway, in Zakynthos there were 275 Jews. I believe I have the number straight. And the mayor and the metropolitan bishop of the island were instrumental in sending them to the mountains to hide, instructing the villagers in the mountain villages to take them and hide them, and not 40,000 inhabitants of Zakynthos never even accidentally disclosed the secret where the Jews were. 275 Jews. I don't know why there was no death or birth, but 275, you know, they survived exactly the same number as when they were in hiding.
That's something.
And
that's in your
nobody told, yes.
book? That's in your book?
Yes. My mother, because my father was recognized too many times and he stopped coming to see me. My mother was a little safer because in the summer they put a sheer silk thing over their heads and wore glasses and sunglasses, and she dyed her hair from black to blonde, and so she changed her appearance a lot. But my father was stuck with who he was, and so she really was easier to conceal. But anyway, I forget what I was answering.
What's something you're most afraid of, or maybe, you know?
Oh, I was afraid when they left the place of my hiding, or one of them at the time, because they never came together. I never knew that they went around the corner if I would ever see them again. That was the terrifying part. But again, I had a real talent for denying my own feelings, and so I just didn't think that way. I just willed myself not to be scared. At one point, I was in my second hiding place after the first people became fugitives for having taken in Jews. I was hidden in a home of a widow, a young widow who was a businesswoman that sold dairy products wholesale. And it was very, I don't know what I was trying to tell you. I'm sorry. I lost my train of thought.
The fear of never not knowing.
Yes. Oh, yes. And there was a time that my second rescuer accompanied us to walk my mother to another suburb, and we were very close to where my parents and my brother had hidden, but that's not where I lived anymore. And I thought of my dad, and I was very upset because I could not conjure up his face. I had forgotten what he looked like. Because, this was like a 2-year ordeal.
Your child.
Sure, you're a child. Yeah.
So,
I have a question.
yes.
Was there anything like a thought or an object or a person that brought you comfort and hope?
People were very depressed at that time. So I was hiding. The businesswoman that took me in couldn't close her shop and come to the suburb where her home was. So she stayed with friends in nearby Athens because the curfew was there and she couldn't travel after the curfew had begun. So I think that there were a lot of these things, like I thought of my dad and I could not remember what he looked like. And I was very upset. But I could not conjure up his face.
So what did you have, going off of what you were saying, did you have a memory? And it was like some people, they'll remember music, they'll remember maybe an object, something that'll provide them when they're in the middle of the depression, when they're in the middle of these bad things that they think about. Like Anna says, I think myself out. I think myself on a walk in the park, and just trying to get out of that bad feeling. Was there something that you found?
I thought of my doll.
Interesting. Okay.
My doll was given to me when my brother, soon after, had a birthday, soon after my brother was born. And so my mother had made the booties and the little pretty dress, and I thought of my doll. But of course, I couldn't have such an attractive, visible object with me. I didn't want to attract attention. There was a time that I went back to my parents because my own rescuers, the first ones, became fugitives for having hidden Jews. So I couldn't stay there. So I went to my mother and father, but they had told everybody in the neighborhood they were childless.
Oh,
So, so and I had a family resemblance. So who was I? So they made up a story that my mother had a sister who had cancer in the hospital, and I was the little niece. That's why the family resemblance. Yeah, and that's why I would disappear as soon as they could find another family to take me in.
So when that happened, did you have to did they have to teach you not to call them mother and father? Did you have to?
No, they didn't have to teach me. I was a born actress.
there you go.
Of course.
We're just about at 5 o'clock, so is there any bits of information or any final questions anybody wants to ask? Anything?
I have one thing that I think is really important with the theme of Righteous Gentiles. Can you tell us a little bit about what the Greek Orthodox Church did?
The Greek Orthodox Church, as I said, was led by a visionary, amazing priest really. And they are really, the Greek church is independent of anybody, like in Turkey or in wherever. You know, there are other Orthodox Christians, but they are not on top of the Greeks.
Right.
You know, and so, yeah, they were amazing. And for example, there's a big city, I don't know, fourth or fifth biggest city in Greece, called Volos. And it's on the coast, not too far from Larissa, my hometown. There was a collaboration between the chief rabbi there and the metropolitan bishop, and they cooked up a scheme which saved 80% of the Jews of that city. And there were foreign people that were part of the Red Cross, and they permitted the rations that were due for the Jews that fled to the mountains to follow them so that they would have subsistence wherever they went.
Wow.
So, I mean,
Yeah.
the church in general, and in particular places, was amazing. And they were all honored, those people that I've written about as righteous among the nations.